Now, tonight we have Brad Long from Efficiency Vermont joining us. Brad has been working with Efficiency Vermont for over 8 years and has spent most of his career working in the green technology sector. His focus now is supporting communities and community-based organizations who serve vulnerable populations, as well as working with rental property owners to improve the efficiency and comfort of their buildings. Welcome, Brad.
Well, we're a not-for-profit organization. We have been doing this since 2000. So we're in our 25th year here working with ratepayers in the state of Vermont. So just a quick high-level agenda here. We're going to talk about what weatherization is. We're going to talk about a health and safety component behind weatherization, because that's a really important piece of this. We're going to talk a little bit about home repair and how that plays into weatherization and weatherization projects. We'll talk about our home performance with Energy Star comprehensive weatherization program, the incentives, how to get involved, the whole 9 yards. We'll talk about our DIY weatherization program for the handy folks out there. We'll touch a little bit about on weatherization agencies. The state has 5 of them, and we'll talk about where to begin. So here we go. So what is weatherization? I love this. It has been super windy lately, and there's times I go to take the dog out and I don't feel like putting on multiple layers. So I might have like a sweatshirt on, and I go out into that wind, and while it keeps me kind of warm, the wind blows right through that sweatshirt. That's the insulation we all have in our attic right now. If I want to stay comfortable outside, I'll put a windbreaker on top of my sweatshirt or my sweater. And that windbreaker stops the wind from blowing through the sweater, which allows the sweater to actually stay insulated. It lets it maintain its insulating characteristics. So if we think about a house, and on the next side, we'll talk about how air moves through a house. When we talk about a house, we need to keep in mind that air is going to rise through that house. And if we have insulation, the air is going to literally move through the insulation. A fun thing I like to do is, if we ever get a chance to get up into an attic and you have like the fiberglass bad insulation, peel up the insulation and look at the bottom side of it. It's most likely gray, dirty, really dusty. And that's exactly what it is. The warm air in your house is rising, and it's dragging all that right through the insulation and out into the atmosphere or into your attic or wherever it goes. So that's kind of the high level of weatherization. But from a scientific standpoint, weatherization is technically related to buildings, and it is really the science of managing moisture and airflow through a building. Keep that in mind as we go down the road here. One of the things that we really want to keep a focus on and want people to understand is that indoor air quality can be greatly affected by weatherization, and sometimes by not having weatherization. Generally speaking, weatherizing a home improves the indoor air quality. Proper sealing of air leaks in a building allows for a controlled air quantity moving through that space. And working with certified Building Performance Institute contractors helps ensure that the air quality is considered when weatherizing a space. We'll get into that a little bit more, but there really is an emphasis and an importance on having qualified people perform energy audits and weatherization of buildings, because health and safety really is a big piece of this. But let's dive into airflow real quick, and then we're going to talk about specific weatherization strategies, and then get into all that fun programming stuff. If we look at this house here, the basement area, the basement sill is where most air comes into a home. And the reason is as the warm air in the home is rising and leaving, anything that leaves must be replaced by something that comes in. So if we keep that in mind, when we warm up a space, an indoor space, anytime air can move through that space and leave the space, something else is coming in. It typically comes in the bottom. This is why oftentimes in homes that are particularly leaky, the first floor is very cold. Like the floor itself is very cold, especially if that home has a basement. So if we take a look here, when we talk about kind of where to weatherize, there's always been what we call the ABC, the attic, the basement, the ceiling. Um, we modified this a little bit. What I'll say is most heat loss occurs in that first spot, which is up in the attic, because that's where most heat collects in the home. So insulating that space and laying a vapor barrier down or an air barrier down so air can't move through it, and then insulating on top of it allows us to insulate properly in attic. The ceiling below that attic space is also a space where we weatherize commonly. So if we look at a ceiling in the room that you're in now, you may have a ceiling fan, you might have some drop lights, maybe you have some lighting fixtures that are hanging down from that ceiling. Below, or sorry, above those fixtures, there's usually an empty spot where an electrical connection is made, and it's usually wide open. So any kind of air that can move through there, any air that can move through an electrical outlet in a wall and move up the wall will make its way into that attic space. So insulating and air sealing the ceiling is really important. In the lower part of the house, the rim joints in the basement. So if you were to stand in your basement, I'm going to show you a picture in just a moment here of a basement. And look at the top of the basement, essentially where the home rests on the foundation. That's your rim joist or your band joist. Most homes in Vermont have about a 4-inch, maybe 6-inch section of wood between them and the outside at that one critical spot. That could be a pretty leaky spot. So insulating and air sealing there is really valuable, as well as the basement walls. Vermont has some of some of the oldest housing stock in the nation. 25% of our homes predate 1940 construction. So we find a lot of basement walls that can be compromised. They can be old, they can be fieldstone, they can be granite block. And all of those types of basement walls can be a little bit leaky, both in terms of airflow, which most people don't equate to a basement wall, but also moisture. And if the holes are big enough, we start seeing rodents and bugs and snakes and all that kind of stuff making their way into the basement. And finally, the foundation. An earthen floor foundation, or AKA a dirt floor in a home, as an example, uh, it's not so much the air that's moving up through there, but it's the moisture. An incredible amount of moisture will make its way into a home. So oftentimes when we talk about weatherizing homes, we need to, I mentioned this earlier, it's really the science of managing moisture and airflow. And when we talk about the foundation, when we talk about the basement walls, the rim joists, the ceiling, and the attic, these are the key areas that we're gonna spend a lot of time on when it comes to actually weatherizing a space or a building. So here is a crawl space basement here on the left. If we take a look at this picture, you'll see a dirt floor. You'll see a fieldstone foundation that's held together with a mortar. And if you look at the very top of it, you'll see some pink fiberglass bat insulation that's been jammed into that space between the bottom of the floor joist and the top of the foundation wall. If you look really closely, you'll see it's dirty. That's air. That's air coming in. That insulation is doing nothing but just kind of holding space. Honestly, it's not helping from an insulating or air sealing standpoint. It's really doing nothing. So this foundation wall, there's dirt on the other side of it. Those are rocks with some mortar in between them. So moisture is coming in through them. Air can come in through them, and certainly through that dirt floor. And if we look on the right, we've got a cat standing in a basement. No, so we do have a cat. But if we take a look, this is a foundation that has been spray foamed right up. Basically, the cat is standing on the top of the stone or concrete portion, and then there is another portion that was brick in this particular building, and then you have the floor joist resting on top of it. So this has been spray foam with a closed cell spray foam, and if you look at the very bottom of the image, what you'll see is a barrier on the floor. So if you direct your attention back over to the left-hand picture, what we would do in a situation like this is we would cover that floor with a barrier, a vapor barrier, and we'd wrap it up the side of the wall, maybe a foot and a half. Then you'd spray foam on top of that, and that begins the sealing process. So the floor at that point in time is no longer making any atmospheric contact with everything above it. It is sealed off. So the moisture and air that could once move through the floor has been sealed. The vapor barrier is wrapped up the wall, that's sealed in with the spray foam, and then that spray foam goes all the way to the top of that foundation wall. And that becomes something that rodents usually can't make their way through. Moisture has a hard time moving through, particularly if it's up to 6 inches thick, and air doesn't move through it at all. That is how you weatherize a basement properly so that airflow and moisture stop entering the home. Here's an example of an attic hatch. In that left-hand side, we'll see a typical attic hatch. This is a great illustration because the attic hatch I used to call the free air highway. Most other places in the ceiling are, pretty well closed up, but the attic hatch is oftentimes a piece of 1/4 inch plywood. It's usually not substantial. It's usually not sealed. So if you look at the first image there on the left, you'll see there's a little ledge for the hatch. In the center image, you can see that there's a plywood or an insulation block built around that opening. And then you'll see 2 layers of rigid foam in the third image that are attached to the hatch cover. And the hatch cover has drywall on the bottom of it. And then there's a continuous weather strip ledge so that when that hatch cover rests in there, there's insulation, there's something to stop the airflow from moving through, and the drywall on it is for fire protection. It's a fire barrier protection piece. So this is a way that we typically will see somebody weatherize an attic hatch, and for all intent and purposes, there's variations of this for any kind of penetration through and up into an attic. An example of air sealing. So this is the windbreaker that I talked about earlier. Image number 1 there, we're peeling back a little bit of insulation, and what we're looking at is there's a wall that's meeting the bottom or the underside of an attic, let's say. And typically there's some drywall there, but where the wall meets the framing of the attic, there's typically a gap there, and we fill it in with a continuous bead of sealant. We seal any penetrations where wires might be coming through, and that stops the air from moving through the insulation. Once that process is done, we can then begin blowing in the cellulose or fiberglass bad insulation, whatever method your contractor recommends. And that is the concept of air sealing and insulating of an attic, and previous to this, the basement. And these are high level. This is kind of a generalization of the process, but it should give folks here an idea of what this actually looks like when we start doing this in a home. So I mentioned health and safety. This is a concrete block wall foundation, and we can see moisture there. If we don't deal with, let's just say, moisture in a basement, and we insulate and air seal in the floors above it, the moisture that used to evaporate through the house will now stay in the house, and that becomes a health and safety issue inside the house. So oftentimes when we're talking about weatherizing a building, managing moisture, sometimes we find asbestos insulation that has to be removed in hot water piping. Oftentimes we'll find vermiculite insulation in an attic. We might find structural damage that's allowing for rodent infiltration or moisture or air coming through. Older homes sometimes may have knob and tube wiring. Some of it's still live. That's not great. The rodent infestation, we certainly want to make sure there's no rodents living in the house before we weatherize it. Any structural failures, lead paint, anything like that, we really want to try to make sure these things are taken care of first, because once we make this house tighter, we're living with this stuff now a little bit more intimately, but that's nothing we want to get involved in. So to that extent, one of the things Efficiency Vermont launched back in October, which seems like a world ago, is our new home repair program. And this really should be labeled home repair with weatherization. The next slide I'm going to show you talks to our weatherization program. So one of the things that we've learned in 25 years of working in Vermont households and buildings is that oftentimes people run into obstacles that prevent them from weatherizing a space. And those obstacles could be a roof repair or a foundation that needs to be repaired. It could be a drainage solution that needs to be come up with. It could be leaking plumbing or vermiculite insulation. It could be a number of things that prevent you from weatherizing the building. Because maybe you've thought about it before. Maybe you've had an energy audit before. And the contractor said, well, it's going to be 10 grand to weatherize the building, but you've got $7,000 worth of repairs that need to be done first. We really can't do it. And that puts you back to the sideline. This program here will allow for up to $15,000 per household to be used to effect a repair in coordination with a home performance with Energy Star comprehensive weatherization project. Wow, that's a lot of words. Okay. Happy to answer questions about this later, but we're going to jump right into the comprehensive weatherization project here. So Efficiency Vermont offers a comprehensive weatherization program called Home Performance with Energy Star. We issue this program through qualified contractors in the Efficiency Excellence Network. These contractors are BPI certified, which means Building Performance Institute certified, which means that they have a bit more of a science background to them. And they're studying, again, the airflow and the moisture management of a building in relationship to how much they can insulate and air seal that space. So for higher income earners in the state of Vermont, folks can receive up to 75% of a project cost back up to $4,000. If you qualify as moderate income in the state of Vermont and you own a home, a resident can receive 75% of a project cost up to $9,500 back. If you qualify as a low income resident in the state of Vermont, you can receive up to 90% of a project cost back up to $9,500. The income levels are based on housing and urban development income charts. And on our website, if you went to efficiencyvermont.com/HP, that would bring you to the home performance page where you could learn a little bit more about the program. And embedded in that page are the income charts that you can use to determine where you might land on this scale. But wait, there's more. So if you want to do some things yourself, we have a very limited do-it-yourself rebate. It's if you complete one project that is relating to air sealing or insulating of your home, you can receive $100 back. Pretty basic, but it's a great way to maybe chip away at something that's been bothering you, or maybe you had some previous work done that wasn't quite finished. Maybe you've been utilizing the window dressers, which you can, if you're purchasing a window insert, you can use it for something like that. Maybe you've just put a new water heater in and you have to insulate the pipes. Either way, this is available to you every year. And for folks out there that have a home but are considered low income, the state has the weatherization assistance programs. In the region of the state that we're talking about this afternoon evening is Sevka. Well, I went through the whole day there. There are free weatherization services that are available. So what this means is that state agencies have dollars and work crews available to help low-income Vermonters weatherize their homes at no cost. This is a great place to start. If all this seems just totally unaffordable, this might be a way that you can weatherize that home and start realizing the benefits of a weatherized home. And you know, the reason that we offer very little financial assistance to DIY versus comprehensive weatherization is really due to the health and safety concerns. You know, weatherizing a window or an exterior door, insulating hot water pipes, I think those are great DIY projects. I think when it comes to comprehensive air sealing in an attic or a basement or throughout the house, you know, getting up into those dangerous places and dealing with potentially hazardous materials, disposal of some of those materials, and making sure that the home is being weatherized in a safe and efficient manner. And then finally checking the health and safety of the home per these professional BPI guidelines once it's finished. It's just, these are the critical components of weatherization. And that's why we offer our incentives for projects that are completed by home performance with Energy Star contractors that we spoke about earlier. It just breaks that down a little bit. One thing I'll say is a lot of folks ask me, I do a lot of public events, and they'll ask me, they'll say, hey, Brad, like, you know, we just need to cut back on our heating expense. The house is, it's cold, and, you know, we're thinking about getting about 3 heat pumps into the house. What do you think of that? I think that we should really talk about weatherizing the space first. Mechanical equipment wears out. Mechanical equipment requires maintenance. Mechanical equipment is subject to many things that can impact its longevity and its performance. And while mechanical equipment can be a great way to achieve greater efficiency and greater comfort, oftentimes working with the building shell first is the most effective way to reduce fuel consumption and increase comfort in a space. I, you know, off, I've seen homes where we've seen reduction of fuel consumption up to about 45%. I'd say the average home in Vermont is going to see somewhere in that 18 to 22% reduction in energy use. So if we just kind of throw a thumb at it, 25-30% reduction in energy use and a greater comfort level in a home is the place to start, and it will last for the life of the home. You don't have to maintain weatherization. You don't have to replace weatherization in 10 or 15 years. It's there to stay. So once a home has been weatherized, that's the jumping point for modernization of the heating system. That's where we start talking about adding, heat pumps or modern wood heating systems. That really is the place. So I just encourage people to think about weatherizing their building first. One of the things that Efficiency Vermont offers for free to everybody living in Vermont is what we call the virtual home energy visit. This is a private consultative conversation between the homeowner or a renter in some cases with a energy Efficiency Vermont home energy consultant, and that consultant will go through the home with you virtually on an iPad or on your iPhone. You can look in the basement. We can talk about sill plates. We can talk about bulkhead doors, and we can talk about weather stripping, windows, and all the things that people have in their mind in their home. One of the things that I've learned through the years is everybody's home is very different, and we all have different goals and objectives and different obstacles to move around. That call with our residential engineer takes all that into account. We try to leave everybody with a personalized strategic plan and the resources available to go out and do that work. So I encourage the virtual home energy visit as a great place to start. It is not an audit. Just want to say that it's not an audit, and it's very specifically not an audit, and it's for a pretty good reason. So give the home energy visit a try. If you're a new homeowner, if it's a new home that you're in this year, congratulations. And this is a great place to start to learn about your home. If you've been there for a while, you're wondering what to do, you don't know what step to take, you don't know where to begin, this is where we begin. And I just want to point out in this picture, if you look at the top of that door and you look above it and you see that insulation, some of it's dark gray. That's air moving through the insulation. No air sealing. Okay. If you are a renter, we work with rental property owners to take advantage of weatherization. There is the income eligible weatherization assistance program that the state offers. There is a comprehensive weatherization with home performance with Energy Star, and there's a little bit of the DIY weatherization. The point I want to make is that if you are a rental property owner or if you are renting, we can help. If you're a renter, we do offer some free products. We can do a home energy visit with you to talk to you about the things in your apartment that might be creating a little bit more energy use or higher bills. And if you're a property owner, myself and another colleague, we work with property owners throughout the state. I'm the beast in the east, he's the best in the west, and we split the state up and we work with property owners to try to weatherize the buildings. So give us a call, we can work with you and help things out. So in terms of getting these projects done, the incentives are great. There's some big money available out there right now, but sometimes there has to be a bridge from a loan standpoint. Depending upon your income and depending upon the term of the loan, you can see the chart here. We're showing that for eligible products, including like weatherization or heat pumps and heat pump water heaters or wood heating systems, homeowners can finance up to $20,000 through this home energy loan and finance their project. That might be an option, helps you get from one side of this to the other. And there's also the Weatherization Repayment Assistance Program, or WRAP. This is kind of interesting. So this is a repayment through your electric utility. So if you have 12 months of good solid payment history with your electric utility, with no upfront cost, you can basically repay the term of your project for up to 15 years on your electric bill. The projects are designed to be cash flow positive on an annual basis, and the project must be initiated with one of our participating contractors. It's just another option for people to find a way to weatherize their building without putting any money up front. And what can you do next? You can reach out to us, 888-921-5990. We're there Monday to Friday. Leave a message if you're most available after hours, and we'll try to make an arrangement to call you after hours. You can schedule that free virtual home energy visit. You can use the Find a Pro page to connect with one of the local contractors. And if you think you might be income eligible, you can call your local community action agency, which in your neighborhood there is SEVCA. And other energy resources. Kind of like to add this one in sometimes because people inevitably ask me, hey, we're thinking about doing solar. We can't help with solar, but Renewable Energy Vermont can. That's an information and business directory for renewable energy businesses, including solar, wind, and battery storage. Drive Electric Vermont, information and resources on electric vehicles and charging stations, and then Go Vermont for commuting. And that is all I've got. I'll leave my email up there for a minute, and then I will stop sharing the screen when Heather gives me a thumbs up, and we'll take questions. Okay, very good.
All right. Thank you so much, Brad.
Sure.
So everyone, in case you missed this in the beginning, we are going to be taking questions through the chat. So you can enter your questions into the chat on the side of the screen. And if you don't see that window, go to the bottom of your Zoom screen, click the chat button, and it should open a window for the chat. And if that doesn't work, feel free to, wave at me and I'll try and get over to you. All right, let's see here.
Thanks so much, Brad. That was great and a fun overview.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay, so we have our first question is from Teresa. And Teresa asks, how effective are the attic hatch kits that you can install?
Teresa, I think that's a good question because back to that attic hatch being the free air highway. I'm not particularly familiar with these kits. Happy to take a look at one, but generally speaking, any time that you can create an insulating layer and an air sealing layer for that attic hatch, it's going to be pretty effective. We have a section on our website, maybe a PDF that we can send around that shows folks how to do that.
Thank you. And yeah, if anyone wants to put a link to like a specific kit in the chat, we can have Brad take a look. Luke has a two-part here, which are these slides available anywhere? We can, if you send them to us, Brad, Heather can send them out to everyone.
Got them.
Yep. And then I'm closing on an old circa 1800 house in early April. Is that too late to do an energy audit?
So, Luke, are you asking if we can do an audit on a house that's for sale for a prospective buyer?
Here, Luke, why don't I ask you to unmute?
Oh, thank you. That's actually not what I was asking, but I would love to know the answer to that. But I was actually wondering if April was too late in the winter season to do an energy audit.
No. Good question. Thanks for that question. April is not a bad time of the year. Airflow will move through the house 12 months of the year. When an actual audit is performed by an independent contractor, they typically put what they call a blower door. They'll open up a door in your home. They'll kind of seal off the front of the door. They'll put a large fan in there. Close everything else in the home and turn that fan on and draw airflow through the home. And they'll be measuring the resistance on that fan. And that's how they determine how much airflow is actually moving through the space. So it doesn't have to be cold outside to do that. The only time large temperature differences make a difference is when somebody's using like an infrared camera and they're taking a look at up in eaves and things like that. And they're trying to find hot spots, call them hot spots, that's usually the cold that we're looking at. And a greater temperature differentiation from inside outside will show up a little differently. April, Vermont, plenty cold. I don't think you'll have any trouble with that. And good luck on the purchase of the home. That sounds exciting.
All right, our next question is from Scott, and Scott asks, does the Efficiency Vermont Home Performance Program apply to condos or only single family homes?
It absolutely can apply to condos. It depends if you've got a condo block with maybe 6 units in it. If you're talking about just your individual condo or the whole block, they might be handled a little differently, but we do have programming available to help folks weatherize their condos. Sometimes they're considered what they call ground to sky, or sometimes they're considered stacked units. So it really just depends on whether or not the condo has its own attic and its own basement, or if those spaces are shared with the rest of the units. But we can work with you to try to sort that out. It can be a little bit complex, but we can try to help navigate that for you.
Thank you. Got a question here from Missy. I had a home energy audit last fall with EEN contractor and have the report. Do I proceed with you or with that contractor?
Great question, Missy. So if you've got a report from an EEN contractor, you would proceed with that contractor. So Efficiency Vermont doesn't do any of this work in the field. We administer the programming. So ultimately, that EEN contractor, what they could do for you is create a scope of work. You could agree to that scope of work, and if the contractor is willing to do the work, you can hire them to do the work, or you can hire somebody else to do the work. The home performance and Energy Star contractor is then responsible for coming back once the work is completed and inspecting it and signing off on it. They're looking for health and safety. They're looking for to make sure that the scope was adhered to, and they're going to do another blow door test to determine how much the airflow reduction has occurred. And then they will submit your project for final payment, and then the incentive will go out. I hope that answers that question for you.
Thank you. So I've got a question here from Todd. Todd shares that the kitchen timbre, or I don't know if you meant counter, Todd, in the corner of the countertop is very cold in winter. I suspect the contractor did not put up Tyvek on that corner under the wood siding in 2007 renovations. Would removing the siding to put up Tyvek and replace siding be eligible?
So I think that you're asking in reference to eligibility for the home repair program.
I can
my guess. Yeah.
I can add to unmute too if we want. Let's see.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna run with this. So Todd, if the home performance and Energy Star contractor identifies a repair that needs to be completed to effectively weatherize the space, then that is a possible eligible project for our home repair program. Essentially, the scope of work for the home weatherization, including the mention of the home repair requirement, would be sent into Efficiency Vermont. We'd approve it, send it back. You could have the repair done and the weatherization, and we'll send incentive monies against it.
Great. And Todd, I think you're unmuted, so if you wanted to add anything to that, you're welcome to.
Tambor is a, triangular storage closet. It's got a door that opens up and down. And there was Tyvek that was flapping in the wind. And I think what the contractor did was, rather than staple it down, he just cut it off. Because it's very cold. I'm not saying that, things freeze in there. Put the coffee pot in there. But I think the siding would have to be taken off to find where the Tyvek is, probably on both sides of that corner, and then put the Tyvek up or whatever, and then put siding back. So my first step would be getting an energy audit. Is that where I would go?
Well, if you wanted to discuss that subject at no cost with one of our residential engineers, I think our virtual home energy visit might be a good place to start. If you were interested in, if you had your mindset, you wanted to go with a home weatherization project, then I think the home performance of Energy Star contractor could audit the building for you and make determination as to whether or not that needs to be repaired or addressed.
Well, we did major house renovations in 2007,
Mm-hmm.
and the energy costs the next winter were reduced 80%. And that's the location, that's the only location in the house that's cold. And it bugs me to think about it every winter.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to kind of, but if I don't know if you're feeling any airflow through there, Todd. But
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, if you're feeling airflow through there, it's if you've had the house, if you had some comprehensive work already completed on the house, it sounds like it might be more of a spot project.
Yes.
Yeah, and that might be something more for a seasoned contractor. I think finding the source of that air leak is going to be your biggest challenge.
All right, so don't bother going through your.
Well, I mean, if in 2007 you had comprehensive work done, I'm not sure that having another audit done would be beneficial.
Okay.
But
Fair enough.
if you wanted to bounce things off of one of our residential engineers, sign yourself up for one of those virtual home energy visits and have that conversation.
I got a note in the chat, Tyvek is not insulation. I realize that. It's just a vapor barrier or air barrier. We did have Daco blow in insulation in the summertime. It is so much cooler in here.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Todd.
Thanks, Todd.
I think I'm up. Hi, Todd. I think I'm up next. Kat wrote here, how stable is the money available for DIY and or pro contractors from here on out? Is it state or federal money?
Great question. We've been getting that one a lot. Most of our funding is state funding, and right now, like the dollars that we have for weatherization projects are accounted for through 2025. Efficiency Vermont is on a triannual plan, so every 3 years we go through a budgeting process, and the money that we have available for weatherization is here now, and that comes from state-funded resources largely. There is federal dollars in that budget right now, but they're ARPA dollars, and they are spoken for and accounted for. So we don't anticipate that we'll see any shrinkage there. The DIY is something we've offered for many, many years, and that's always been in our budget. I don't anticipate that going away anytime ever.
Great, thank you. Question from Catherine. When working on a home as a renter, do income brackets refer to the income of the homeowner or that of the renter? Great question.
Great question. Complicated answer. Are we ready? Everybody have a beverage? This is going to be a fun one. So when it comes to our home performance with Energy Star program, if somebody was looking at weatherizing a rental building, okay, let's say it's 1 to 4 units, we qualify the building and the incentive levels based on the rent level, not the income level of the individuals in the space. If we have a duplex, a triplex, or a quadplex, and one of the rental units is occupied by the owner of the building, we start to consider income level for the owner in that scenario. Ultimately, if you are trying to receive the weatherization agency weatherization, the no cost weatherization, that is most of the time qualified and determined first by the rent level, and then at least the income level of at least one tenant in the building. If that doesn't answer your question, hit us again.
All right. From Dan here, how does EVT decide on the level of rebates? Ductless heat pumps now have very low rebates, though the cost is very high. Not enough contractors / competition. Well, I received 5K for my heat pump hot water heater.
That's a good question, Dan. Sometimes it depends on the funding sources and the goals behind those funding sources. So as an example, the weatherization dollars that we have right now are very robust. And I mentioned this a minute ago, a lot of those weatherization dollars are funded by ARPA funding. So that money, the state asked Efficiency Vermont to help people living in Vermont weatherize their homes. That was the specific ask that we had presented to us. So that's why that money exists like that for weatherization, let's say. When you start talking about like a ductless heat pump, this is a different budget. Okay, we have the energy efficiency charge that appears on everybody's electric utility bill in the state. That's where the majority of our funding comes from. And that budget is therefore being used for everything that we offer an incentive on for electric reduction. Okay, so totally different funding source than the ARPA funding for weatherization right now. So the funding sources are different, and the heat pump incentives. Certainly if you're looking at a mini split, and that's a $350 to $450 incentive against maybe a $5,000 installed cost. That's not going to seem very robust. I would certainly tend to agree with you. The heat pump water heater funding that you received, the 5K for the heat pump water heater, again, that's in the ARPA bucket. So those incentives were a little bit more robust. But think about it this way: most of Efficiency Vermont's funding and effort and focus throughout the 25 years we've been here have been on helping Vermonters reduce their electric consumption, and Vermonters have responded really well. The thermal side, the heating, the insulation, the air sealing, different bucket. So you might see fluctuations and changes of those two buckets as we go down the road. One of the rules of thumb I always encourage people to do before you make an investment in your home is call us first and have a discussion with us about the project you're thinking about doing and the incentives you expect to receive.
Great, thank you. We have a follow-up question from Catherine. So for a single home with renters in it, but the homeowner is living elsewhere, income bracket would be determined by rent amount and/or the income of the primary tenant.
Good clarification, Catherine. Thanks for following up. So a single family home is that's being rented. It's going to be the rent level, and that's going to be the qualifying piece there for that. It's really going to be the rent level compared to the number of bedrooms in that home.
Thanks, Brad. And I just put in the chat the SEVCA link to their page for weatherization for landlords. It might be helpful to someone, and it's got the income qualifications for everyone. So
Great.
Good to look at.
Well, this is good questions tonight, everybody. Everybody's still awake. We're doing great.
Yeah, do we have any other questions here?
I don't think so. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to put those in the chat. I'll also be sending out a follow-up email with Brad's slides, so you'll have all of the details from those slides in that email, as well as a recording of this talk tonight. We have a nice compliment from Dan. Efficiency Vermont has been very effective. And one more question. How many heat pumps have been installed in the last 5+ years?
All of them. That I'm not really sure. I saw a figure the other day, Dan, that showed that there are some 66,000 of the mini splits that have been installed in Vermont. And I don't know how many years that is. I think we've had 30 something of the geothermal heat pump installations. There's also the air to water heat pumps, and there's also the air to air through a distribution network, kind of a centralized heat pump systems. They all add up to somewhere in the neighborhood of about 71, 72,000 different heat pump installations in the state so far.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
I got distracted because someone asked about other community action groups besides SEVCA, because it depends where you live in the state. So I just put a link in the chat. You can enter your town and see what you're covered under. Like I'm in Stratford, so I'm actually Capstone technically.
Okay.
And that's what Teresa said. So SEVCA is for us here in the Upper Valley. What about the Essex area? Who would they contact? Do you know? I actually don't know Essex.
I think off the top of my head, that CVOEO, Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity. That's off the top of my head. I might not be. I think that's accurate.
We've got a question from Helen. How many qualified contractors are available?
I don't know. So if you were to go to our Home Performance with Energy Star page, and you there's a find a contractor link there, and you can find the contractors in your area that are willing to service your area. It's different throughout the state. Certainly, I can tell you in some parts of the state we have greater contractor concentrations, and that tends to follow populations. So in areas where there's greater population density, we tend to see more contractors. In areas where there's lighter population density, we tend to see less. Um, it's I think a challenge the state has been working on for many years. We at Efficiency Vermont have just hired a workforce development manager to work with stakeholders in the state to help build a better workforce, a more qualified workforce, and a more robust workforce. Um, Contractors can participate in our program from other states as well. So neighboring New Hampshire, Massachusetts, if there are contractors there that are willing to service into Vermont, and they're willing to be part of our program, we can work with them as well. So I don't have an answer as to how many contractors there are, because some are just for heating and plumbing, some are just for weatherization. It varies, but it's probably not enough, to be honest with you.
Thanks, Brad. Kat asks, is there anything that can be done for a concrete basement floor?
Yes. If the floor is relatively dry, there are coatings that can be placed on the floor. High level, you can think of it as a paint or like an epoxy that will seal moisture and air out of that floor, preventing it from coming in. This is a great question for an experienced home performance contractor, somebody who's been doing this for a while. The key is really how dry it is. If that floor is already dry and in good shape, doesn't have any structural challenges, then an epoxy base or some kind of a weatherproof barrier probably could be applied. I have seen concrete floors where they've taken the vapor barrier that we showed a picture of before and laid it down. Stuff can be pretty robust, but I think it really depends on what you're dealing with there. But it can be, you can weatherize a concrete floor. Sometimes they really don't need to be, but sometimes it's good to do that.
Okay, thank you. I think that was our last question. If anyone has any last question they want to squeeze in, now's the time. But before we go, I'll just share with you all again, our next Green Drinks event will be an in-person event, a sewing workshop with some very skilled volunteers. We'll be learning how to mend rips in your clothing, reattach buttons. There will be a sewing machine if you want to learn how to use that from someone who is very knowledgeable. And you are welcome to bring your own projects if you have something like a sweater with a hole in it or something you want to have help with mending. So that will be on March 1st from 1 to 3 p.m. at the Taftsville Chapel. And because of the nature of the event, it is we can only take a limited number of people. So if you want to join us, sign up soon.
Cool event.
All right, it looks like we got all those questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And thank you, Brad. That was a really great presentation. Lots of good information, which we will send out to everyone in our follow-up email.
My pleasure. Nice to see everybody tonight. Stay warm. We're getting more daylight. We're getting
Yes. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.